Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we are going to be breaking down and making sense of the 49ers three-way trade for quarterback Kirk Cousins. It was a potential trade that Peter King of NBC Sports put out, and I'm going to go ahead and break it down brick by brick on whether it's a realistic deal or not, and whether or not it makes sense for all the parties involved or not. So, without further ado, we're going to dive right into it. But before I go ahead and do that, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. And if you have yet to do so, please do so in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. Obviously, I'm looking at my analytics and I'm noticing that around 70% of you are still watching all my stuff, but yet have yet to subscribe to my channel. So I'm asking you to please do me a solid right now and subscribe to my channel and spread the word to all your family and friends as we continue to grow the BEASTwriter family and really build up this social media engagement that we are developing here on YouTube. All right, so like I said, thank you for all who have subscribed, and I really appreciate all the comments that I've been receiving. As you guys know, I'm all about social media engagement. No voice is greater than mine. We all have a voice as long as you're respectful and courteous and kind about it. Just don't be a douchebag and be a troll. Like, that's the only thing that I ask in the BEASTwriter family is no one opinion is greater than the next. So let's all respect each other's opinion, because at the end of the day, none of us are the GM or none of us are the head coach. So our opinions really don't matter anyways. So without further ado, we're going to delve right into it and break down Peter King's potential three-way trade involving Kirk Cousins and whether or not it makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about that. And for those of you who have yet to read the article that Peter King put up this morning, I'm going to go ahead and post a link to that article in the description below. So be sure to go ahead and click on that if you wish. And we'll just go ahead and get started. So let me just pull up that article here. And again, it's a three-way trade involving the San Francisco 49ers, Minnesota Vikings, and the Houston Texans. And Peter King's three-way trade proposal says, this is centered on the premise that San Francisco would not want to rip apart a team and a future, and might be willing to take a lesser deal for a quarterback Shanahan has long admired, Kirk Cousins. And also that Caserio, when he talks about Caserio, it's Texans GM Nick Caserio, in the heart of the draft room in 2014 when the Patriots made Garoppolo a second-round pick, would want to try again with Jimmy G. It's a wing and a prayer, but fascinating to me. Fascinating to me too. That's why I put earlier podcasts on that potential trade. Great minds think alike. But this is Peter King's proposal, all right? All joking aside. The Vikings send quarterback Kirk Cousins to San Francisco. The Niners send Garoppolo to Houston, if, of course, he'd waive his no-trade clause. The Texans send Watson to the Minnesota Vikings. In return, the Niners send their first-round pick in 2021, which is the 12th overall, to Houston. So San Francisco would be trading Garoppolo and a 1 to Houston and getting Cousins with 2 years left on his contract. The Vikings would then send outside linebacker Anthony Barr and running back Alexander Madison, plus their first round picks in 2021, which is 14th overall, and 2023, and second round picks in 2022 and 2023 in exchange for Watson. So Houston hauls or nets Garoppolo 2 1s this year, a 1 in 2023, and 2 second round picks. Well, I know that's a lot of moving parts, so I'm just going to break it down in simplest form for you guys so you guys can kind of figure out what the heck Peter King is talking about, and I'll just break it down brick by brick. I love using brick by brick when I discuss about anything about the San Francisco 49ers, because obviously they do things brick by brick. Not throwing shade, I like the term brick by brick, honestly. But okay, getting back to this podcast, the 49ers get quarterback Kirk Cousins with 2 years left on his contract. And in doing so, they give up Jimmy Garoppolo and the number 12th overall pick in this upcoming draft. So is this realistic, right? We all know that I wrote an earlier podcast on why Nick Wright's 4-way team trade was unrealistic. And I'll include that in the description below. You can watch my take on that. And oh my gosh, you got so much feedback because it's funny. This is not the NBA. But when it comes to Peter King, he actually makes sense. Because if you watch my earlier podcast and you tie that into what Peter King put out today in his article, my Deshaun Watson trades all involve the same players that he's talking about in that article. So again, great minds think alike. Be in the know before you know. Remember, that's my motto for the podcast. Be in the know before you know, where social media engagement is encouraged. No, but it's true though, right? You guys are already in the know before they know because I already put it out there. For instance, he talked about possibly, don't want to spill the beans because obviously if you guys want to read the article, but he talked about Brian Burns being a potential chess piece in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. And what I say in my podcast? Oh, Brian Burns. Go figure. But getting back to this podcast, let's go ahead and talk about that. The 49ers get Kirk Cousins, but give up, like I said, Jimmy Garoppolo, and the number 12th overall pick in this year's draft. And it's a likely scenario because if you're looking at it from Kyle Shanahan's standpoint, you're basically wiping your hands clean of Jimmy Garoppolo's contract and what he doesn't do well. And you get the player that you wanted all along in Kirk Cousins. So basically, it's an upgrade at the position. Upgrade. See how I'm using the terms that's been thrown out there? Oh yeah. Furthermore, when you take that into account, that's already a win. And giving up the number 12 overall pick, I can see GM John Lynch pulling the trigger and Kyle Shanahan liking that move because at the end of the day, you get an upgrade at the position and it's the most important position on the football team. Peter King makes a positive note here, and you should not take this lightly. GM John Lynch is on the fence about mortgaging the future if he has to get rid of Nick Bosa or Fred Warner as any depth piece or chess piece in a potential Deshaun Watson deal. And I don't see that playing out because now you're mortgaging the future when you can have similar results, maybe not better results, because obviously Deshaun Watson's a better play long term when you talk about the instant gratifications versus long term gains, as I do in all my podcasts. But as far as instant gratification is concerned and the short term bridge gap quarterback that you can win with and ultimately open up that Super Bowl window again, Kirk Cousins might be the smarter play because he already knows the system and Shanahan already knows what he's getting with Kirk Cousins from their time in Washington. So with that being said, it makes sense. Great job by Peter King by putting out a realistic 3-way trade here. Or is it? Now let's talk about what the Texans would be getting in return for shipping out Deshaun Watson, who doesn't go to the San Francisco 49ers, but then goes to the Minnesota Vikings, all right? So in this deal, obviously the Texans get Jimmy Garoppolo and the first-round pick in this upcoming draft. They also receive running back Alexander Mattison from the Minnesota Vikings, outside linebacker Anthony Barr, along with 2 first-round draft picks, which is one in 2021, which is 14th overall. So they would have the 12th and the 14th overall pick, giving up draft flexibility. And then they double down on that in 2023 with another first-round pick. And then they pick up 2 second-round picks in back-to-back years in 2022 and 2023. So if you're doing the math, that's killing 4 birds with 1 stone when you actually take a look at it brick by brick. What I mean by that is, if you watched my earlier podcast on why Deshaun Watson trade how do I explain this? If you watch my earlier podcast on all my Deshaun Watson trades involving the Houston Texans, you will notice I put out J.J. Watt, Brandon Cooks, and David Johnson. Those are names that have been thrown out in all my podcasts when it comes to Deshaun Watson. Why? Because it comes down to salary cap health and a decreased cap, moving down from 198.2 to roughly 180. Nick Caserio has to find leverage in manipulating the cap some way, somehow. And how do you do that? Well, you dump contracts that basically were dumb by BOB, Bill O'Brien, And one of those contracts is David Johnson. When they got fleeced by the Arizona Cardinals for the DeAndre Hopkins deal. And oh my gosh, I talked about that in an earlier podcast. Once the trade was made in real time, and people were like, oh no. And then David Johnson had that good game. And oh man, that looks like, and then I was like, I'm going to put out a tweet. I'm going to cash in on this Twitter receipt. I said, I don't care if you had a good game. You don't trade the top wide receiver in the NFL for damaged goods. And where do we stand today? Cashing in on those Twitter receipts, baby. No, I'm just joking. But no, the reason why Peter King put out Alexander Mattison in this trade scenario is because you're dumping David Johnson's contract when Nick Caserio didn't even want that guy in the first place. He's not the one that made that bad move. And in doing so, you really help the cap out because you're killing 4 birds with 2 stones. David Johnson you'd be saving the team, I believe it's $6.4 million in cap savings if you release or trade David Johnson. And the Texans are barely head above water because they're about roughly $6 million above the cap. So they need salary cap health. And if you can wipe your hands clean of a contract that you really didn't want in the first place because you came in and he was dirty leftovers, and then you bring in a guy like Alexander Mattison, it's a win-win. Furthermore, you compound that line of thinking with outside linebacker Anthony Barr, because if you look at the free agency pool, you will notice, if you're Nick Caserio and you're looking at it and be like, oh, well, shoot, man, our starting outside linebackers are unrestricted free agent. Brandon Scarlett's not going to be with the team anymore. So we need an outside linebacker. Why not try to get another depth piece in return in Anthony Barr without having to sign a free agent in free agency? We can already have him in part of our trade for the top 5 franchise quarterback. Absolutely. So it does make sense. Great job by Peter King, because again, you land 2 depth piece players at positions of needs, and then you also gain draft capital in return. 2 first-round picks, man. You have number 12 and number 14. So you can maneuver and manipulate the draft how you see fit, because you can move up and down the board, gain more draft capital in future years or this year, while then having an additional another 2 first-round picks in consecutive years in 2022 and 2023. And speaking of 2023, you have another first-round pick there. So it's like when you land 5 draft picks while giving up your franchise quarterback and then also including 2 depth piece players at a position of need when you need to find those players in free agency, but you don't have enough money to go and get those players because you're head above water, barely, when it comes to salary cap health, it makes financial sense. So great job by Peter King. I think this is a realistic trade. Now, what are the Minnesota Vikings giving up? Well, they just gave up all that draft capital and Anthony Barr and Alexander Mattison. So they're giving up the most players out of any of the 3 teams. And they're giving up the most draft capital of any of the 3 teams. But they get their franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson. It's a likely scenario because when you think about what Nick Caserio wants in return for a franchise quarterback, that's what it's going to take. And this is just one scenario of Peter King's article. He actually brings up another article where he has a potential deal for Deshaun Watson. And I am going to talk about that in my next podcast. Well, I'm not going to say that's it for today, but I'll be back. And anytime you go and talk about a potential Deshaun Watson deal, you're going to have to give up the farm. So my next podcast, don't be surprised if Peter King has a coveted player for the San Francisco 49ers going to the Houston Texans, because that's what it's going to take to land the franchise quarterback. Well, that'll be it for right now. I'll be back with my second Peter King breakdown in regards to a potential 49ers trade for Deshaun Watson. Thank you for tuning in, guys. And again, if you liked what I had to say, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as you stay up to date on all things Beast in real time. Also, do me a solid, if you have not yet already, hit the like button, because I know you guys like my stuff. So give it a thumbs up like Wayne's World. That was corny. But no, I'm on my high right now because I got my pre-workout in. About ready to go to the gym. So I multitask when I'm reading my comments in between sets, talking to whoever, and I'm just like, man, that's a great point. This guy has great analysis. You guys all bring great points. And I love it. Because it makes me think. As much as I make you guys think, you guys make me think, bro. And I love that. So keep them coming. Spread the word to all your family and friends. And let's grow this motherfucker. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day. BEASTwriter. Out.